And that's all I have. So as I said, that was a very high level, kind of a fast paced sort of presentation, because like the scope and the complexity of all of these things would be such that it would require a full day of sessions in order for us to really get into the depth of it. But I'm now going to open it up to questions and entertain a discussion for as long as you'd like. So I'll give to you. The hand went up here first. Do you want the microphone or?
Sure.
Yes, it's not the same question I asked earlier. You answered that. Is net metering going to change? And what would it take to change it so that you can actually generate more electricity and than you need in a year and get paid for it? I mean, as the current situation, is there a possibility of changing? What would it take?
Will this mic work if I just talk?
That's it is. You can hear everybody else just run.
I don't foresee, now anything can happen, but I don't foresee the net metering regulation changing. And the reason for that is the province wants to enable homeowners and business owners to meet their own demand, but doesn't want additional capacity beyond that, because utility operators are concerned with the effects of generated power on the grid as that power makes its way back through the distribution and the transmission system, particularly at transformer stations. And so the idea is to limit the reverse flow of electricity and keep any generated power as locally used in as local a space as possible. And so this is where we get that term distributed generation from. And the idea is that we're generating, we're storing, and we're using that energy exactly where it's needed, and we're not burdening the grid any more than is needed to sort of distribute that local generation around to where it's needed. So I don't foresee the province changing the net metering regulation, because they don't want to encourage people to build systems that are larger than what they personally require.
That's presently rules set up for
Yes,
that.
yes.
But there's a value of actually being able to use your property to generate income. Having been in the whole regulatory government relations area, just because something is like it is currently doesn't mean that it can't change.
I agree. I agree 100%. And we did have, and so just so everybody was able to sort of hear that, it was a reference to being able to generate additional revenue from generating power on your property. And we did actually have a program in Ontario from 2010 to 2016 called the Feed-in Tariff Program under the Green Energy Act, which paid for your electricity, and that prioritized not using electricity in your home, but generating and selling all of that electricity directly back to the grid for a fixed rate on a 20-year contract. It is possible that something like that comes back into existence. I have not heard any talk of it as yet, but it is a possible lever that the province can pull in order to bring more sort of private generation online.
So it can happen, and like will take the government change.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through a couple of review processes for the net metering regulation, and I've been a part of those discussions, and it doesn't change quickly, and it takes a long time to implement any decisions that are made. And so it's, it is like there's a larger context conversation around generation and distribution of energy. That is definitely an option as part of the solution. Again, I'm not hearing anything about it at this point, though.
Well, there's two questions. The first is, can we get a copy of your presentation? Okay, especially the graphics. And secondly, you didn't talk about batteries.
Okay.
You focus on the panels.
So batteries, I did sort of, I did allude to batteries. You're correct. I didn't spend a whole lot of time speaking specifically about battery technology and about, limitations and capabilities. Is there a specific question about batteries that you're?
Because there's so many batteries now.
Right. Okay. In terms of manufacturer options, in terms of brands, in terms of, okay. So, energy storage. The leading manufacturers are, Tesla, obviously, and then we have Sonnen Battery, we have Savant has an energy storage system, Generac, who makes gas-powered backup generators for homes, has acquired an inverter manufacturer and a battery storage manufacturer and has a clean energy line. So there are several options available for energy storage solutions, some of which provide DC power and some of which provide AC power. And there are a number of factors, pros and cons for either or. So your peak demand in your home is probably going to look something like around 10 to 15 kilowatts if you have everything turned on. So if your air source heat pump is operating, you have all the lights in your home on, you might be charging an electric vehicle, you might be cooking dinner, you might be running the dishwasher, your peak loads are probably going to get to somewhere between 10 to 15 kilowatts. And so the requirement when we talk about backing up 10 to 15 kilowatts becomes a little more expensive and a little more difficult from a regulatory and a code perspective and from, an equipment perspective. And so this is why we tend to say, with a power control system, we can put less batteries in the home, we can manage the loads, we can keep that peak demand below 10 kilowatts and even lower, as low as we want to set it. And with a more affordable, moderately sized battery, we can back up the home for a longer duration of time. And so, again, it's there's a lot of factors to consider when we talk about battery storage. The main factors are, what is your peak demand and how long do you want to be covered for during a grid outage? And so the peak demand thing we can understand pretty well from the energy model, and then from the energy monitor once the home's built, it'll tell us instantaneously and over time what your peak demand and peak draw from the grid is, so we know what that target is, and as well as how much electricity you use on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis. And with that information, we can design several options and design the perfect option because we have real data. Prior to that, we're using the model data, which we do see as being quite accurate, but it's not quite as highly defined as actual data, obviously. Does that answer your question? Any follow-on? Okay, all right. Yes, sir.
I think you should streamline your mission statement to something simple like where there's a will, there's a way. When you're generating power in the summer, let's say, you're doing it at a certain rate, and you're probably using power at a different rate in the evening. Are you given credit on an hour-to-hour basis, or are there certain incentives for generating power at certain times of the day?
Thank you for that question. So the short answer is the Ontario Energy Board has clarified for utilities that they are to offer time of use rates both on purchase and on credit side for net metered customers. So what that means is as a homeowner, you're actually going to have the choice to either have a fixed flat rate utility rate structure or to enter into one of the two time of use rates, which is current time of use, off-peak, mid-peak, peak, or ultra-low overnight rate. And you will therefore be given appropriate dollar cost credit depending on the time of day that you are feeding back into the grid. So, for instance, that peak rate on the ultra-low overnight rate structure happens between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. While this time of year, we're not really generating anything at 4 p.m. or afterwards. However, May, June, July, August, I was sitting in the Sydenham in August, I think, and it was 6 o'clock, and the system was still producing 7 kilowatts. And so that energy is being credited under the ultra-low overnight rate structure at 24 cents a kilowatt hour. And so, Simon, you could provide clarification on this, I think, if and stop me if I have this wrong, but it is going to be an option for net metered clients to decide which time of use rate or which rate structure they want, and credit will be assigned appropriately to exported energy.
That's right. It already is. So
Okay.
3 methods of billing is already implemented, and residents can choose how they want to bill.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, Rebecca, do you want to explain the packages? Sorry, we had another question. Okay.
There are things with regard to ESA approvals. I know there's a bit of an issue there. Can you cost of the ESA?
Okay, so ESA, Electrical Safety Authority, is the authority having jurisdiction to enforce the electrical code in Ontario. And it is required that every system that we build gets inspected prior to its energizing and commissioning. And they have to give us what's called connection authorization. So for 10 kilowatts and under, it's a pretty straightforward process. We pull a permit out. We are a licensed electrical contracting company, so we pull a permit with the ESA. The cost for that is $350. We build the system. The ESA comes out, inspects, gives us connection authorization. We energize the system. When we go over 10 kilowatts, we have to submit what is called our design to what is called ESA plans review. That carries an additional cost of about $800 to $1,000 depending on the system, the size of the system, and the components involved. ESA plans review looks at that design, approves it ahead of the installation. Then we move forward with that same $350 deposit, do the installation, inspection, commissioning accordingly. I think what you're alluding to is once we go over 10 kilowatts, from a utility standpoint, we have to complete what's called a connection impact assessment. And that is the thing that brings in a level of complexity and cost in the application process and extends the timeline from a few days to a few months and extends the costs from a few hundred to several thousand. And so, we've been in several conversations with utilities, with the Ontario Energy Board, with MPPs, with mayors, to push for change in this area because it's a burden that most homeowners cannot absorb, and it's unrealistic to ask homeowners to do so because it radically changes the cost benefit equation, and it makes it almost unviable from a financial perspective. And so we need change in that area, and this is part of the thing that we're advocating for quite loudly. It's hard to say close when it comes to regulatory changes. Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. And so, there are meetings, there are discussions. Simon and I actually had a chat this morning because I asked the question, has there been any progress on a potential increase to that 10 kilowatt limit? And if so, is there a timeline? There are meetings still happening. There is a review underway. We definitely shouldn't expect any announcements this year. However, I think we should expect to hear something if there is going to be a change early 2024.
And can you just comment on what the other provinces are at to give people context?
I can. So, interestingly, energy is a provincially regulated and controlled aspect of political sort of structure. And so, British Columbia, for instance, if you want to build a renewable energy project, you can go up to 150 kilowatts without a connection impact assessment. Quebec, you can go up to 50 kilowatts without a connection impact assessment. I've had conversations with engineers at various utilities as well as Electricity Canada as to why that is. The responses are things like, well, BC prepared their grid decades ago for this. And my question is, well, what did they do specifically to prepare their grid? And what would be required in Ontario for us to do the same? And it's not easy to get straight answers to those questions. So I'm still not sure myself, and I can't actually tell you because of that reason. So energy is a complex thing. Obviously, there's a legitimate risk to property, to life, if we get it wrong. So, there is a tendency to proceed on a very conservative path with regards to changes and implementing changes because of the potential for catastrophe. And that's the approach we want to take. But we do want to hurry it down the road a little faster, I think. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a different
No, it does not. And so Landark is designing their roofs to have additional capacity for the added dead load of, or it's actually a live load, the added live load of solar panels on the roof. And so what that translates into is a more reinforced truss system and roof structure to accommodate the distributed load, which includes both the added weight as well as wind uplift pressures. And so the racking that I showed you on an earlier slide that said here's what's going on underneath the array, that's been wind tunnel tested up to 120 miles per hour, because that's a pretty extreme limit. Obviously, we could test beyond that, but we don't see those winds on a regular basis. So it's been modeled for like the 1 in 100 year wind event. And so once we get beyond that, we'll see structural impacts to the home that are not caused by the solar array, but are just caused by the wind itself. And that'll happen before we see an impact caused by the solar array. So the system is designed to withstand that, the roof is designed to withstand that, and the installation is done such that you're not going to experience any effects from wind on the roof or from the array. Yes, sir.
My last question for sure here. Is there an arbitrage opportunity between the ultra low price of electricity overnight and storing it and then releasing it back onto the grid at some point when it's much higher and taking solar totally out of the equation?
Great question. The way energy storage systems are designed, they are non-exporting distributed energy resources. So so with the Tesla Powerwall, for instance, it has the capability, but it comes from Tesla without that enabled to export energy to the grid. So it's meant for use in the home only. There's an arbitrage opportunity for you to charge it overnight and then use that stored energy to supply your own requirements in your home, but you're not going to be exporting that stored energy to the grid because the battery systems are not designed to do that. The utilities don't want us doing that. The Ministry of Energy doesn't want us doing that. Unfortunately, that arbitrage does not exist from a exporting energy and getting credit from it perspective, but it absolutely exists from my own personal use perspective. Because if I'm charging my battery at 2 cents a kilowatt hour and then I'm using it during a 24-cent rate period, I'm winning as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not exporting that stored power to the grid.
Kind of an odd question. We have recent experience in selling a property, and one of the first questions that are asked are how old is the roof, how old is the furnace, which affects the value of the house. And it strikes me when I look around the room, many of us aren't going to be here in 25 years. Some will. So it strikes me that a solar array, along with the roof, of course, is a diminishing asset, which affects either resale in however many years, or our heirs and successors, in that they inherit a house that has a diminished value because there's this looming prospect of not only replacing the roof, but the solar array and probably a lot of the other components as well. Is that a legitimate concern?
Market data would suggest that it's not. There are several studies that have been done that actually suggest the opposite. Resale value of homes that have a solar installation is typically higher than homes without, particularly as more people become familiar and comfortable with the thing itself. A properly installed solar array is going to generate power. We use 25 years as a realistic timeline because that's what most people can conceptualize. But the system's going to work well beyond that, 30 years plus, easily. And in terms of your reference to a diminished capacity, the degradation rate of a solar array over time is about 0.3% per year in decreased generation, which is almost negligible. And manufacturers warranty that at year 25, the system is still going to generate a minimum of 80% for what it's rated to generate. And so your anticipation of degradation is not, it should be that it's very minimal, and that your system at 25 years is going to perform almost as well as it does at day one. And depending on whether your demand grows over time, you might need to add more solar panels and more generation capacity. Otherwise, you're not going to need to do anything, and that system's just going to continue to deliver power for you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that there were some areas of the province that the grid won't handle the net metering currently. Are we by any chance in that one of those areas?
We are not. Simon has verified that Westport is green. There are other areas that are serviced by transformer stations and Rideau St. Lawrence distribution system that are constrained, but currently Westport has capacity. And I think Kevin and I and Mike, I think, are going to be talking about securing some of that capacity for the community so that it's going to be there and nobody else can take it.
The gentleman at the very back, he's had his hand up many times. Please, let's honor him.
Yes.
I just heard recently there's going to be a big battery storage installation down near Crosby in the Rideau hydro right of way. So that it seems like the Ontario government or somebody is building these battery storage for our hydro grid. I'm wondering, is there any possibility of having a community battery, like if Watercolor could set up a community battery for the subdivision so that all the homeowners don't need to have a battery and use it as a backup?
So, yeah, and so it's a great question. And is there a possibility? Absolutely. I like to say there's the possibility to do just about anything exists. From a cost perspective and from a regulatory perspective, the way to do it would be much easier and less expensive to have individual energy storage in each home as opposed to one centrally located bank that everyone can pull from. And the reason for that is as we increase the amount of storage capacity and as we increase the amount of output capacity of that battery energy storage system, then we enter into different classifications of generator, which come along with additional requirements from utilities and from Electrical Safety Authority to install and operate the system, which cause costs to escalate very quickly. And so that is why Hydro One themselves are experimenting with this pilot project where they're putting 2,000 batteries in 1,000 homes, as a means to sort of have a meaningful amount of energy storage that they could pull onto the grid, because that is one way to do it. The other way is we build large centrally located battery energy storage systems, and so that's going to be part of the solution as well. But those are considered utility scale and not practical for your average community, because then we get into the issue of, well, what does the ownership structure of that thing look like, and who's responsible for maintenance or upgrades should that become a requirement. And so now you're talking about a condominium ownership type structure, and now you've got a board that has to make decisions on behalf of that entity that operates that thing, and then how do you fairly allocate that stored energy amongst the community? So these are not insurmountable problems and questions that can't be answered, but I think the stage we're at right now, it's a much easier, much more affordable approach to just say each home is going to have their own storage. Sure.
On your website, it says you've got a home-based area. You charge extra to work outside of that. And you're certainly inside that now. Is that still applied?
So it's a great question, and I appreciate that. the renewable energy industry in Ontario and in Canada has experienced several sort of interesting ups and downs, and it's been difficult to plan and grow a business around that. And so we've stayed small, nimble, and flexible deliberately. I can actually stand here in front of you and say for the first time in 15 years that I've been doing this, that I actually legitimately see that there is potential for us to grow the business and to start spreading out across the province. So one of the first places we're looking at is actually right in this area because of the commitment that, that Landark has made to Net Zero Ready and Net Zero Homes. And so, that would eliminate that conversation altogether. Obviously, there's a transition period. I've had conversations with our team in terms of, well, what happens if 1 home or 10 homes or 30 homes all decide that they want to have solar installed? And then in that case, the conversation becomes, there are no additional costs. We figure it out as a business. We move into the area and we deliver those projects, and then we're right here on the ground to service and provide any additional support after installation. And so that's how we're looking at it, and that's our view for the future. And this is the first time that I can personally say that I see the opportunity in order, like the financial viability of actually doing that, because of where we're headed here as a province and as a country. Absolutely. It's a simple, you're going to need a disconnect, reconnect. So the utility's going to have to come in. We'll have to shut the power down at the transformer. We'll pull the wires out of your microfit meter. We'll feed them back into your main panel, or do a line side tap on your load meter, and then you continue to operate the system. So because the utility has to come down, disconnect at the transformer, work has to get done, ESA has to be called in to inspect, utility comes back and re-energizes the home. It'd be a day, but it's a very simple process.
There's a question right here, Will.
Yes, ma'am.
You said something earlier on about Hydro One putting in a bunch of power walls.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly. So there's a pilot project underway, and they are targeting homes in rural areas that experience a high percentage of grid outages, and they are offering homeowners an opportunity to participate in a pilot program where Hydro One at their expense will install 2 Powerwall. We're doing the installation in a part of the province, and then those Powerwalls are brought online. The homeowner has the opportunity to use that stored power and interact with that battery energy storage system, and Hydro One maintains ownership of the equipment. And part of the agreement is that Hydro One, as needed, can reach into those batteries and pull the stored energy out to do things like grid stabilization or to provide power during grid outages. And so, this is an interesting one, because the question earlier was, can I use my battery to export energy to the grid? And I said, well, Powerwall can't do that. Well, they can do that. They're just shipped from the factory with that turned off, and it takes level 2 engineering to turn that on, and a letter from the utility company. Hydro One, being the utility company, says we want this feature enabled because we're going to use this power. And so it's an interesting pilot, and we look very forward to seeing what what data comes from that and where it goes.
Is that something that can be happening in this community?
Well, let's see if Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution wants to do a pilot.
So those projects are meant for peak shaving, essentially. So remember, most energy, as Will said, is being used at the late afternoon in the summertime. And so we don't have a need to implement power walls to apply the peak shavings for the transformers and infrastructure that we put in place. And so we don't have that program in place. And also our electricity rates can support that program.
So at this point, I'm going to bring Rebecca up. Rebecca has put together some packages here that we've sort of been reviewing with Landark as a means to simplify things. Rebecca's been with us for almost 3 years now, runs our sales and marketing department, and is a great resource and wealth of knowledge. What I will say is that, we do this because it's an easy starting point and puts sort of a bracket and a frame of reference around various levels of implementation of the technology. And then from there, it makes it easy for us to customize.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. So based off of the model home, we've created packages based off of the tiering. So that'll be the custom solutions here, as we believe are going to be priority for you, that are going to hold the most value for you, depending on what you're wanting to do in the home. So with the first package there, we're looking at the conscious home. So just looking at offsetting, your energy with the solar with anywhere between a 5 to 10 kilowatt system. So what's currently on the model home right now is a 10 kilowatt system, and that is offsetting 100% of that energy. The resilient home, looking more at being resilient from that grid in that power outage. So, 5 kilowatts of solar with one power wall to really provide that power in, a 12 to 24 hour backup period. The sustainable home is where we're looking at more of a duration. Let's say, you're gone on vacation in the wintertime and you're really wanting extended power in, those undetermined times. And then in that case, we're adding in smart energy panels or the smart energy system to ensure that, loads are being derated in the home to extend that overall energy storage. And then the final one there is the autonomous home, where we're adding in that EV charger. We're providing the whole home solution. So it is a peace of mind, but you're also being as sustainably conscious as possible. So if I'm looking at sorry, go ahead.
Powerwall. Mm-hmm. What is it exactly? What does that mean?
So when I refer to the Tesla Powerwall, I'm referring to an energy storage solution, so a battery backup solution. Yeah, and that's the standard that's at the model home. Like Will mentioned, there's a lot of different manufacturers on the market right now. Generac is definitely one of them, but for simplicity, we're just using what we've provided in the model home for an easy comparison. So that's what's installed. Yeah, and just to provide some clarification, the Tesla Powerwall is the larger square here, and then we actually have the energy gateway that handles that energy going to and from the panel. So when I'm looking at the first page here, the conscious home, we do have, based off of a 46 gigajoule energy consumption in the home, which is based off the model home. You can see in that bottom right corner, thank you, bottom right corner, just the amount of energy offset that we'd be looking at. So you're looking at anywhere between 50 to 100%. The light green is showing the 100%, the dark green is showing the 50%, and that's just based off of the size of system. With the resilient home, we are focusing on just offsetting 50% of the energy in the home because we're adding in that extra 5 kilowatts for the battery. So, you're not being as energy conscious in order to offset all of your energy, but you're more providing resilience for the home, so that peace of mind in that grid outage. And then when we're looking at the sustainable home, you're focusing still on essentially the resilient package, but adding in that smart energy control, which allows you to offset your energy by 50 to 70%, and then also extends your power outage with managing those higher loads to derate so that you're extending the battery life. And then finally, the autonomous home, which is just showing that EV charging capability. And you are offsetting the home by 75 to 100%. Now, with the autonomous home, there is something that Will mention, which is the connection impact assessment, which does take into effect with this if you're going larger than a 5 kilowatt battery and 5 kilowatt solar. So if you were to do 10 kilowatts of solar and one battery, then you're into that connection impact assessment, which currently right now with utility is added application utility costs. So definitely worth a conversation if you're considering that. And that's it. That's all I have.
Another question.
What's the life expectancy of the power wall?
So that's an interesting question. It's warranted for 10 years, and what Tesla warranties is that at 10 years it's still going to charge and discharge up to a minimum of 80% of what its rated capacity is. So its rated capacity is 13.5 kilowatt hours, and they warranty that at 10 years it's still going to be able to provide a minimum of 80% of that. The truth is that lithium chemistry, battery technology, which is a nickel manganese cobalt, hasn't been around long enough for us to actually know. Battery management systems play a very important part to longevity of battery. Tesla is, I think, the world leader on battery management systems. And so what that is that regulates the charge and discharge of the battery to preserve and prolong the life of the battery. Because if you charge a battery too quickly or discharge it too quickly, you can end up destroying the chemistry of the battery and then it's useless. And so the battery management system and the controls that Tesla has developed and put into the Powerwall, very sophisticated. There's no reason whatsoever for us to think that it's not going to meet that 80% at 10-year expectation. And if it does not, I can tell you from firsthand experience, we've had 3 occasions where Tesla has notified us that they're sending us a replacement battery for a project that we had done a year or 2 previous, where a battery was not performing to their level of expectation and requirement. So I get an email from Tesla saying, hey, we're shipping you a new battery for this client, and they cover our cost of labor and travel to go out and replace that battery and then send the other one back. And they're completely proactive. So it didn't require the customer or us to notify Tesla that there was an issue with the battery. They sent the battery replacement, then notified us, then compensated us to go out and do the replacement. So from a service perspective, from an ongoing warranty perspective, I have no concerns there. From a technology perspective, I think it's too early to say yet, but our expectation is that it's going to go some amount of time longer than 10 years for sure. Yeah.
So what's the cost today to replace one of those batteries?
Well, those situations I referred to were placed at no cost to the homeowner because they were done under warranty. So the cost of a Tesla Powerwall, it's very public information. In fact, we don't mark it up. We're not permitted to. Tesla sets the price, and that's the price whether you buy 1 or 1,000. And currently that price is $9,800 for a Powerwall, $1,550 for the Energy Gateway. They add on a shipping and logistics charge. So for your first Powerwall, your equipment costs are about $13,500, and then each additional Powerwall adds another $9,800, and then there's a labor component, and there's other sort of equipment like wires and breakers and conduit that are required to tie it all together. But your equipment costs on the Powerwall side alone are $13,500-ish for your first one, and then another $9,800 for every one you add after that.
But you're also already calculating into ROI, replacement partway through. Return on investment, we talked about earlier.
Yeah. So we're not doing ROI calculation on battery storage, and the reason we're not is it's not an ROI discussion. And so in terms of how long would it take me to recover my capital investment on a battery storage system, the answer to that is you won't, because the cost of batteries right now is such that your savings would never offset that over time. Whereas solar, on the other hand, it's a much easier ROI conversation because we can actually confidently say there's going to be annual generation. You're going to offset your utility expense with that generation, and that cost savings can be factored into the ROI calculation. But on the battery side, now that we're seeing this ultra low overnight rate and the opportunity to say purchase at 2 cents and use during peak and offset 24-cent rate, the conversation becomes more interesting. We haven't dived into the math on that yet, but typically there's no ROI on energy storage. Energy storage is energy security, resiliency, backup power, peace of mind, protection for your home and family.
But we're buying a whole system. We don't care whether there's 3 components to it. There's a particular amount of money to be put out, whether piece A will last longer than piece B.
Right.
Is that we asked about $50,000, $60,000.
Right.
That's what the ROI needs to be on. So
Yeah, so then it goes back to the thing, which is there's no ROI. Quite frankly, because when you add the battery storage component on it, you add a cost to the total project price that is not going to be recoverable through cost savings on your utility expense. So there is no ROI conversation when we talk about that system.
And if you could talk about the two government programs for people who install solar after.
Yeah, so the Canadian Greener Homes program right now offers the opportunity for homeowners who've been in their home for 6 months or more. So it's not something that you can do during construction, unfortunately, which is a crazy oversight in my mind. But after 6 months in the home, the program allows you to access up to $5,000 in grant money and up to $40,000 in interest-free loan. The loan has a 10-year term at 0%. And there's an application process. So there's a government portal, there's a registration on the government portal, there's an approval, then there's an energy audit, and then that then opens you up to the opportunity for grant and loan possibilities. And that can only start after being in the home for 6 months. So if that is something that you're inclined to sort of think toward, then there's nothing wrong with saying, I plan to do this, I want to access the grant and the loan. What can we do during construction to make sure that this home is ready to just add stuff in once I've hit that 6 month mark? And so there's a rough-in component that LandArc can make happen. And so the home is fully ready to add in renewables at any point in time down the road. Is everybody's brain hurt yet? All right. Well, listen, I thank you very much. Great questions. It's been an awesome opportunity to stand here and talk about this. It's something that I actually do enjoy to do, so thank you for permitting me to do that. And any follow-on questions, I'd be happy to answer at any point in time. You have Rebecca's email address. My contact information will be available through Stephen, and yeah, happy home building.
So thus concludes our regularly scheduled programming here at the Cove. We want to thank you all for being here. We try and put these on quarterly with something of information that could be of value to you and to those you know and love. So thank you very much for being here, everybody. And we look forward to having Will back next year as well. Thanks very much.